What's going on, everyone? It's Ben from YGO from Zero, back with another retro Yu-Gi-Oh video, back with another Chaos Return format video. Now, Chaos Return format, if you don't know, is the format held 1 year after GOAT in August 2006 at the SJC Indianapolis of that year, using the April 2006 limited list and a card pool going up to Enemy of Justice. Now, this format is a bit different from predecessor Reaper, and that mainly comes from the changes to the ban list, things like Graceful Charity being back in the format for some reason, limited here, no Dark Hole as well. And, you know, the new cards from Enemy of Justice are cool, but there aren't really too many that shake up the meta that much or open the possibilities to new decks. Now, the deck I'm showing off today is one of the new decks that you can actually make with Enemy of Justice, and that's Counter Fairies. Now, Counter Fairies has been a somewhat popular sort of rogue strategy for quite some time in the game's history, and this is where the deck begins. Because, you know, now we've got Bountiful Artemis, which is a level 4 light fairy monster, 1600 attack, 1700 defense. Each time a counter trap is activated, immediately after it resolves, draw one card. So the idea is you're negating your opponent's stuff, you're drawing cards to sort of like draw deeper into the deck, replace the cards that you used to negate your opponent's stuff with, and hopefully that leads to a win con somewhere. Now, the issue with this is that, one, there aren't too many really good counter traps in this format. Of course, we got Solemn Judgment here. There's Magic Jammer, I guess, Negate Attacks here as well, which can be very useful, and Force Back as well, along with Divine Wrath. And those are really like the only counter traps worth playing in this deck. You do have Horn of Heaven, and you have 7 Tools of the Bandit, but neither of those are really that good, especially because, like, in this deck in particular, you're not really caring about like traps unless you're trying to get more aggressive with your monsters. And because we have to fill the deck so much with counter traps to make Bountiful Artemis worth playing, you know, we don't really have the room to do that. So for that reason, I'm not playing 7 tools. And it's kind of awkward because, you know, you're drawing cards, sure, with Bountiful Artemis if you can find it. But, you know, what do you do if you don't find this? And also, how do you actually win the game after drawing all those cards? Those are questions that I thought about for quite some time when building this deck, and I decided ultimately to sort of build it into a burn deck. So I'm playing a triple copy of Stealth Bird, and this may be like, you know, the least fun way to play this deck, but I do think it is sort of the best version of the deck, because you could go with Voltanis, the Adjudicator, and that's a, you know, sort of fairy boss monster that when you activate a counter trap, you can tribute all your fairies and bring it out and then pop cards equal to the number of cards you tributed. 28 attack on it isn't that bad. But the way I figured it is like that strategy, or that version of the strategy, really suffers when you don't actually draw into things like Artemis, which is the main fairy that you'd be playing. And there aren't really other good fairies that you can play. I mean, Banisher of the Radiance is one that you could potentially play. But, you know, this deck isn't really leaning too hard into the whole banish strategy side of things. There are other decks that do that better. And so I think in general, it's like the Voltana stuff is not really that useful because it's very, very specific. And even if you do bring it out, because you're not generally attacking in with Bountiful Artemis, because likely your opponent will have monsters to wall up with, or they'll, you know, sort of have back row that you don't necessarily want to run into, you're not really clearing the way for your Voltanis to actually do much there. And your opponent will likely have the removal to deal with it. So I'm not playing Voltanis for that reason. And if you're not playing that, you know, there isn't really much else you can do. You can play like Layard as well to benefit from counter trap, but Layard is just a monster. Lets you add 2 banished fairies from hand whenever a counter trap resolves. And, you know, while that can be cool, I feel like it's not a really good resource engine when all the fairies you're playing are generally pretty bad. So I'm not the hugest fan of that version of the deck. I'm not the hugest fan of this version either, because I think that this deck, it is not really quite there yet. It really is very fragile, and it suffers a lot when you don't see the pieces that you actually want. But, you know, it is what we have to work with here, so that's what I'm sort of doing here. So let's go through the card by card real quick. We got 3 Bountiful Artemis here to draw cards off your counter traps, the sort of linchpin of the strategy. And if you don't draw it, yeah, you're kind of out of luck. There's no way to search this thing out. We got a break with the Magical Warrior to pop our opponent's back row. You know, this could potentially give us a way to get a little bit more aggressive, but it's more for things like Royal Decree if they're playing that in main. Although it's, you know, also an unsearchable card, so we're just hoping they're not playing Royal Decree in main. If they are, this deck kind of auto loses. But this card can come up in like games 2 and 3, and also it can be aggressive pressure if you do want to get in some burn through means not Stealth Bird. We got Morphing Jar to draw deeper into the deck. Yes, we are drawing a lot with Artemis, but because we're sort of just like, you know, a set 4 pass deck, you know, we are going through our cards pretty quickly, and Morphing Jar can help us replenish our hands. We got a Sangan here to search out a variety of other cards in our deck. Honestly, just Stealth Bird or Morphing Jar, but since we need Stealth Bird as sort of a win con, it's very good to have this as a searcher. We got triple Stealth Bird here. to flip up and burn our opponent for 1,000 each turn. With our counter traps, we can hopefully protect this thing. And also we're playing floodgates as well to protect it. And we're playing counter traps to protect the floodgates. So hopefully we should be able to do something here. But, you know, if they do manage to disrupt this or just get this off the field somehow and you're not able to recover it, then you are in a really bad spot. We got a Book of Moon here to just act as a defensive measure for our monsters. We've got a Confiscation here to rip a card out of our opponent's hand. We've got a Graceful Charity to draw deeper in our deck. We've got a Level Limit Area B to wall up against the opponent. We've got a Swords to do the same thing, except this is only on a 3-turn clock. And then we've got all the trap cards. Because this is a counter fairy deck, you know, we're playing the counter traps that I mentioned, you know, Solemn Judgment, Magic Jammer, Negate Attack, Force Back, and Divine Wrath here. Divine Wrath is a card that, like, isn't really the best against all matchups, but it is something that you could potentially play. And you could even, like, use one of your own cards to trigger it. For instance, if you've got, like, Morphing Jar or something, and your opponent doesn't really have many cards in hand as well, you could flip Morphing Jar, activate Divine Wrath, and then get a draw. But then you're sort of going really minus, but it is something that you can potentially do. It's just really bad. You're not generally using it for that purpose, though. You're using it for things like Exiled Force or Breaker or other things like that. So it can come up. It's just kind of rare. We've got Call of the Haunted to bring back our stuff. You know, if we bring back a Stealth Bird and then set it down with its own effect, then that means that Call of the Haunted being destroyed will not destroy the Stealth Bird, so that's kind of nice there. We can also use this to potentially bring back an Artemis to just get our draws back online. We've got Double Gravity Bind to act as another Floodgate. We got a Magic Cylinder to deal some more burn damage. We got a Mirror Force to protect our monsters here and prevent any super aggressive pushes. We got triple Raigeki Break to deal with our opponent's stuff. I figure if we're drawing cards with Artemis, hopefully that can fuel the, like, sort of discards that we need there. Although this will not trigger Artemis, so, you know, we won't replace the draw here, but hopefully through our other counter traps, we'll be able to sort of get the fuel for this. And lastly, we got Triple Dust Shoot, because I figure if we're using things like Force Back, our opponent will likely end up with a 4-card or higher hand, and so this will be online more often. For the side deck, we got a couple different things. We got Triple Dimensional Fissure, because our deck didn't really need the graveyard that much, and having this to stop our opponent's graveyard shenanigans can be pretty good. We got Triple Double Snare and an MST here in case they bring in, like, the Decrees and Jinzo. This can be very good at dealing with those. We've got Double Nobleman of Crossout to deal with our opponent's sets. We've got a Snatch Shield to take their stuff. Won't come up that often, but it's here for certain aggressive decks. And if we burn them down enough with Stealth Bird, this can come up. We got a Ceasefire here to both deal a little bit of extra burn and also deal with more flip focus strategies. We got a Saku for more aggressive strategies. And lastly, we got Triple Threatening Roar for OTK strategies, or if they bring in a ton of spell and trap removal, this can be very good to chain to that. For the Fusion deck, there's not really much here besides just the standard sort of Fusion deck that you'd play in this format. You know, we're not playing Stein or anything, and we're not really playing any ways to take Stein in the main, so this will almost never come up, but it is good to just have as a toolboxy Fusion deck. But again, you can sort of proxy in any card you need, because we do play with an unlimited Fusion deck in this format, because that's how it was played at the time. And that's going to do it for the deck breakdown. Let's dive into some games and see how it actually plays. Okay, we only got one match for this video today, but hopefully after seeing the match, you'll understand why I felt like one was sufficient here. We're going to dive into the Rock, Paper, Scissors, and unfortunately, we do lose Rock, Paper, Scissors, which is rough because we do generally want to go first. You know, we are the counter trap deck, which is meant to sort of react to what our opponent's doing. But this is about as perfect a hand as you can ask for, so I can't really complain too much. We are just going to, you know, let our opponent do their thing. They're going to set 3 paths back to us. That's perfectly fine by us. We draw another Stealth Bird on top of that, so that's pretty good. We're just going to start by setting the Stealth Bird, setting a Solemn Gravity Bind and Book. The reason we do this instead of summoning the Artemis, we don't necessarily want to use Solemn right away. You know, dropping down to 4,000 early is not necessarily the best for us. So I figure we can set the Stealth Bird now, get the burn damage online, and then we can bring out Artemis to just sort of profit off protecting the Stealth Bird if they've got a way to deal with that. Anyways, we're going to pass back to our opponent. They're going to bring out a Breaker here, and they immediately shotgun the Breaker before we have a chance to react. So, you know, what we do here is we always book this down, right? We don't have Artemis to profit off the Solemn flip there. So, you know, Book is the best way to trade a back row with Breaker, because this can't stop any of our stuff there. But we book down the Breaker. And I think maybe the quick reaction there was just because of lag issues or something. But yeah, I mean, we're booking that before they get a chance to target one of our back row. They go for DD Warrior Lady attacking into our Stealth Bird. We're just going to Gravity Bind that. And that will protect our Stealth Bird. We'll be able to flip it up next turn and deal some damage. So they're just going to pass back to us. We draw Comfy, which is also pretty good. We're going to flip the Stealth Bird, deal 1,000. They're going to go for TT here. We could Solemn that, but I don't really feel the need to when I've got another Stealth Bird in hand. So they're going to take 1,000 from that. We're going to go for Comfy here and take a peek at what they're working with. They've got double creature swap and a Chaos Orc. I could potentially take this Orc because, you know, they do have that online. But I feel like given that we're just sort of coasting off the stealth bird here, I don't really feel the need to do that. So I want to take one creature swap, because if they do have a way to sort of like, take the stealth bird at any point, then we're in a really bad spot. So I'm just going to deprive them of creature swaps here and leave them with the Sork. So maybe that wasn't the right play. Maybe I should just let them with double swap. But I still feel like this is the best move. And then we sit the Artemis, because we're trying to get them to use the swap early. If they use up the swap early and that's their one swap, then I feel pretty good about that. Even though they can flip up the Artemis and profit off of our counter traps, which is very annoying, I do think it's more important just to have the stealth bird online for us. But now that we've got the Artemis there to sort of give them off a creature swap, we can just feel free setting the stealth bird. We're going to set a gravity bind as well, just in case they've got like MST for this gravity bind. I don't necessarily want a Solemn MST, so I'll just float the other gravity bind and be fine with that. We draw another Solemn here. We're going to flip that stealth bird, deal 1,000, set this Solemn, pass back to them. They are going to go for heavy here. This is definitely a Solemnable moment there. We're going to go for Solemn and stop that heavy from going through. They're going to go for call for some reason. I guess for their creature swap thing there. They're going to creature swap. We're going to give them the Artemis, because again, we want the stealth bird online, because that's our win con. And they're going to pass to us. We draw a level limit area B. We're going to deal 1,000 off the stealth bird, set it back down, and pass back to them. We could potentially go for level limit here, but unless they've got like Magician of Faith exactly to go into the heavy there, I don't really feel like it's worth it. So, I'm just going to keep this in hand in case they do have a way to clear what we've got here. They're going to set another pass back to us. We draw a negate attack, which is pretty good. We're going to flip that stealth bird, deal 1,000, switch the warrior-related defense, and then pass back to them. Again, they've got like Magician of Faith to get back heavy. They've got that. But I feel like we've got Solemn for that. And also, we've got this other bind here if they don't have that. They're going to set 2, pass back to us. And we draw a Magic Jammer. Magic Jammer is pretty good. We're going to flip this stealth bird, deal 1,000, set the Magic Jammer, pass back to them. Again, this sort of gives us more insulation here. And I feel like there's not really much they can do here. They're going to go for Dust on that Gravity Bind. And they're going to flip up all their monsters to attack in. We could just let this go through because, we can just banish the Assailant and the Warrior Lady. But I don't really even feel like we need to do that, because they probably have a plan with that. So we're just going to flip this bind, pass back to them. Or they pass back to us, that is. We draw Dust Shoot, which isn't really the best here. We're just going to flip this Stealth Bird. We're going to think about this a bit. And we are going to fire the level limit and then set the Dust Shoot, pass back to them. Because I feel like they're at a point where if they, have a way to go plus here, then we want to Dust Shoot them. Like if we activate a counter trap, if we're forced to do that, then they'll be drawing with Artemis, and then we can Dust Shoot them. So that's why I feel like doing that's okay, but, it could definitely backfire for us, especially because now our back row's clogged. But either way here, we're dealing 1,000. If they don't have a way to deal with it the next turn, we just win. And, in standby phase, when they're at 4, we're going to go for Dust Shoot, but they just admit defeat here because, they know that they can't deal with this Stealth Bird here. So pretty good showing for the deck game 1, but I do feel like the deck is somewhat favored game 1 if it manages to draw decently well, because a lot of the time your opponent is just not prepared for that sort of level of trap, sort of stun floodgate sort of thing in game 1. But game 2, a lot of decks do have side deck cards for it, so we might suffer a little bit more in this game. And this is also not a very good hand. I mean, we got all our counter traps and stuff, but we do not have, ways to convert off them. And that's sort of one of the other big flaws of the deck, is that, if you have these counter traps, but you don't have your Artemis, you don't have your Stealth Bird, etc., then it can be really bad for you. So they're going to just Dust Tornado, blind. I think that makes sense because they want to stop our counter traps before we have a chance to respond to them. So they're going to hit a Saku there. Set 1, go for Breaker. And I do think about this Breaker on the summon. And I think here that it is correct to Solemn. And the reason for that is we're taking 4,000 for Solemn, but we're taking 3,400 from Breaker plus Kaiku if they hit the Mirror Force. And so I figured better just to Solemn here and then prevent them from summoning this Mirror Force later. They're going to attack him with the Kaiku. I could potentially Mirror Force this now, especially because we have this negate attack in hand. I think in hindsight, I probably should have just Mirror Forced it here, but I'm getting a little bit greedy. And so what I decided to do is I set 3 cards here just to sort of wall up a bit against what they've got. I've also got Threatening in case they do go for a board wipe here, but I also have this Magic Jammer to stop it if they've got like a heavy storm or something. And then I pass back to them. Unfortunately, they snipe the Magic Jammer, so that could potentially turn bad for us. Then they go for Mobius here, and they pick the 2 that are not Threatening Roar. I mean, it does make sense to go for the card that we protected with Solemn, so that makes sense. And another reason why we potentially should have gone for the Mirror Force on the Kaiku. But now we're forced to use our Threatening Roar here, and that's just going to be pretty bad for us here. So We draw swords, which can help us a little bit here. We're going to fire that, pass back to them, but it's not looking good for us. They go for Stein for some reason, going for Cyberblader, and okay, this potentially gives us a way back into it. They didn't really need to do this, especially because Cyberblader doesn't really do anything against this board. It would only work if we had 3 monsters on field, but if that happens, then we don't really care. They're going to go for a Cyber Phoenix as well, just sort of building up their forces here. We set a Magic Jammer, pass back to them, and they're going to tribute for a Jinzo. And I do think I just have to Solemn this because most of our deck is traps. So we like draw into Gravity Bind that's dead against Jinzo. So we need to just get this off the field. And they're just going to pass back to us. We draw into Bountiful Artemis. We finally have a monster here, but unfortunately it probably won't be enough. We're going to set that and pass back to them. We could, well, actually, it doesn't even matter if we have face up because we can't use Magic Jammer here. I said it because, like, we can call this back as well. So the only way we, well, actually, there's not really a way we really survive here because Mirror Force is gone, so they should not switch their monster to defense here. They do ultimately switch the monster to defense. I mean, they did not have to do this. If they didn't do this, they would have won this turn. Mirror Force was gone. But, you know, it happens, and hopefully we can sort of take advantage of that to win the game. So they're going to attack him with the Cyber Phoenix. They take 5. We draw Book of Moon as well, which is pretty good. We're going to go for this Bountiful Artemis into the Mobius. They go for Book on our Artemis here. What do you think about this? Because we could potentially just let that go through and then save the book for defensive maneuver next turn. But I feel like, honestly, I'm just going to Magic Jammer this because I get the draw off Artemis afterwards. And so it replaces the Book of Moon in hand. And, you know, I feel like I just need to get digging for things that actually help us here. Because right now we don't really have much of that. Unfortunately, they've got Solemn here. So, you know, that will indeed go through. And we've just gone pretty minus here. So there isn't really a good way that we win this game at this point, especially after that decree gets fired. And yeah, they're just going to attack in to our Artemis, and that's just going to be the end of that game. So rough stuff there for sure. But again, you know, they had the tech cards in for our deck. And that's why we bring in like the triple double snare, the MST. We take out the Divine Wraths because those are not really good at all. We take out the Dust Shoots as well, given that they're on a Warrior deck. And I figure like Dust Shoot against Warrior is not really that good. We did this actually in game 2 as well, but it just never came up in our draws there. Which, you know, to be fair, you know, like it would not have helped much there, I think, either way. I guess we could have used double snare on the Jinzo instead of solving it, but either way, it would not really have mattered that much. So, yeah, we're going to go into game 3, and hopefully it turns out a little bit better for us here. This is a pretty good opening hand, all things considered. We got Artemis, and that's what we want. We're going to bring out Artemis, set 3, pass back to our opponent. And I set 3 because this leaves 2 in hand, so that way I can activate Jammer and Raigeki Break if I need to. So I feel like this is pretty good. Opponent's going to start off with a Cyber Dragon, and then bring out a Breaker, and I think I do have to just Raigeki Break this before I can pop something. I pitched the Raigeki Break because it seems like we're running a bit low on cards in hand, so it probably is just better to pitch the other discard card there. They're not going to attack, and that is very smart for them because, you know, we do have negate attack here, and if they attacked in, we'd negate it, draw a card, and that would have been pretty good for us. So I think what we have to do here is just set an MST. I leave the Artemis in attack because I figured, like, okay, maybe this will bait them into attacking here. If they're worried about Saku and they bring out like a DD Assailant, then they could try and attack him with the Artemis, and then I negate attack the entire thing. So I feel like, you know, this is just to goad them, but I think honestly we should just switch to defense because it's a pretty easy goad to tell on their part. So they're like, okay, they've got something, they want to attack into this Artemis, so I'm not going to attack into it. So I should have switched the Artemis to defense. But we'll see if that ends up mattering in the future. They're going to go for Decree here, and we're just going to go for MST right away. The reason we do this is because if they've got some other cards like, you know, Graceful Charity, for instance, and then we can't Magic Jammer that, then that would be quite unfortunate. So I do just, you know, shotgun the MST on that Decree there. Unfortunately, they've got Jinzo as well. So Jinzo will be able to hit over this Artemis. We take 800. If it had been in defense, we would not have taken that. So, you know, we'll have to see at the end of the game if that actually matters. But either way, we can double snare away this Jinzo. That's why double snare is nice in a deck like this. Deals with Decree and Jinzo, which are the big problem cards for this deck. So our opponent's going to set 2, pass back to us. We draw into Threatening Roar. We're just going to set that as well. We could have potentially kept it in hand for the Jammer, but I think Threatening Roar here is very good if our opponent has like Mobius or something. So I want to play around that. And our opponent is just going to set another, pass back to us. And I'm fine keeping this negate attack in hand since we already have one on field. So we don't need 2 on field. They're just going to go for a Cyber Phoenix here. And we can't actually use negate attack because this prevents things from being targeted. So, you know, that's kind of interesting. I'm not sure we'd want to use negate attack there, but it's just kind of a neat sort of anti-synergy for us. But we draw Graceful, which is really good. We're going to go for that Graceful, try and draw 3, draw our way out of this, and that's a very interesting set of cards here. So what I do is I pitch a negate attack and a force back. The reason for this is that I've seen one decree out of them already. I need ways to deal with other decrees. And also, if they do manage to bring back Jinzo with something like Call or something, I want the double snare for that. So I feel like having the double snare is pretty good. I also can set this Mirror Force here to deal with these Cyber Phoenix. They're going to go for Mobius, popping the Magic Cylinder and the negate attack. That's a bit unfortunate, but we do still have this Mirror Force here, so we can just go for that, and I do just go for that. And our opponent's going to go for Avarice here. Oh, that is rough. I could potentially jammer this, but I decide not to because I'm very scared of a decree. I don't want to lose the double snare at this point. And I mean, maybe I just should have done it because this is like a +1 for them, which is not really good for us. But we'd be down to 1 card if we magic jammed this. And I'm not sure a Threatening Roar and a Dream is enough to carry this. So I do just let this go through. I don't know. Maybe that was a mistake. But I feel like we're just in such a dangerous spot that we need to save this magic jammer for more impactful cards. But I don't know. It definitely could have backfired on us here. They go for Coffee. We will just let that go through because Jammer does the same thing here as that Coffee. They go for Extermination on this Threatening Roar. That's quite unfortunate. We will just chain that. Doesn't really matter at this point, but it is what it is. We draw into a Jammer. We're just going to keep that in hand for our Jammer on field. And then they're going to go for MST there. We're just going to let that go through because no point into activating that Jammer. They're going to attack in for 15 here. Pass back to us. We draw a Threatening Roar, which is pretty good. We're just going to set both those, pass back to them. We don't want to get like blind Dust Tornado in the end phase here for our Threatening Roar. And I figure I can draw into other cards here, to use for Jammer. But our opponent's going to attack him with Warrior Lady, pass back to us. We draw Force back. I do think I need to bring this out in case they draw into the Jinzo or a Mobius. Force back can stop that. Instead, they're going to go for Stein here. And this is a bit interesting. We could potentially not force back this, cause them to take 5,000, drop them down to 2,000, and then we Threatening Roar to stop whatever, they do here. But then we have to hope that we draw into a way to stop what they're doing on our following turn. So what I'd rather do here, I think, is just go for the Force back and then hope that I get some way to wall up the DD Warrior Lady so that way I can save the Threatening Roar for the Stein. But, I could definitely see the other way around as well. Because the Warrior Lady is just lethal damage into us here. But if I draw into sort of like a blocker or something like that, then we're in a good spot. But unfortunately, I just draw into a Raigeki break, so I'm going to set that, pass back to them. They're going to go for Extermination on our Raigeki break. We've gone through our other 2, so nothing else to banish there. And they're going to attack in for 15 with the Warrior Lady. We're going to Threatening Roar that to stop that from going through. And unfortunately, Devil Snare will not quite do it. We're just going to set that as a bluff, pass back to them. They're going to go for Heavy here. Does not matter in the slightest. And now they're just going to go for Cyber Stein just to style on us a little bit here in the end of the game. So that's going to do it for this one here. I do think like there were some things we could have potentially done differently in this game. Like we could have, I mean, I don't know. I think the play here was not to commit the Cyber Stein into our multiple back rows and just, keep attacking him with the Warrior Lady because like, you have Cyber Stein to get under Gravity Bind level limit if I do activate that. And even if we'd been at 800 life points after a Warrior Lady attack, I feel like it's still good to sort of just play the slower and steady game here, as opposed to just going down 5k. But either way here, we were so far behind for pretty much the entire game. And that's the thing, like, Counter Fairies, very neat deck, can win game 1 a lot of the time. But oftentimes, if your opponent knows what they're doing after siding, you're just in a really, really tough spot, and you're just always behind. And it feels so bad with that. And you wouldn't think the deck that has a draw engine built into it would be so far behind all the time. But that's how it goes. A lot of the counter traps around this time do require, like, discards or things like that. Mainly just Magic Jammer and Divine Wrath. But those can add up, especially even if you're drawing into other things. Like, you are still going neutral in that interaction. So it's not even really like a draw engine in the normal sense that you'd think of. But yeah, this deck is not quite there, in my opinion. Yeah, I think future releases will help it a bit, but like right now, there's not really a good reason to play it. If you want a high roll with like the Voltana stuff, you can do that as well. That's kind of a fun, different direction to take this deck. But I think it is just a bit worse than this version, and this version's already pretty bad. So yeah, it's tough to see this deck doing much in the future, but there are multiple different directions that you can go with Fairies. Maybe someone will come up with something that I have not. And so, let me know in the comments down below if you have different ideas for what to do with this deck and how to potentially build it differently. Also, if you like what you saw here, definitely subscribe to the channel. Try to reach 1,500 subscribers, hopefully 1,600 by the end of July. But I'd really like to reach that 1,500 goal. And we're so close. We're less than 10 subscribers away from reaching that goal. So if you like what you saw here and want to see more content like it, definitely subscribe to the channel here. Also, join the YG from Zero Discord server, linked in the description down below, to find games in Chaos Return format and any of the other formats that I've covered, as well as to join in our monthly tournaments and our weekly locals. Also, if you want to support me directly, I have a Patreon linked in the description down below. And if you join the Patreon, you get shout out in these videos. So big shout outs to GeoMyFest, Rincewind, Pork Chop Coon, Brendan Donker, Tyler Compton, and Dump Truck. It really means a lot that you all support me this way and encourages me to make more videos like this in the future. But I hope that you all enjoyed. As always, until next time, I've been Ben from YGO from Zero, and I'm signing off.